if you just want to introduce yourself to the podcast.
So wait, let me put the volume up because I can't really hear you. So I am Renata. I am mostly a photographer. I was born and raised in Mexico, and I came to the U.S. for college, and I'm in my last semester right now. It's exciting. It's also very scary. It's like there's all these opportunities, and you don't really know where to go, and just because you can go so many places. But I think that's part of life, and like intuition will eventually lead me where I belong, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a process of just trying to figure out where everything falls into place.
Where I feel like you do stuff and then you realize that you don't like it, and then you do something else, and it's a lot of that.
Yeah, it's just experimenting with everything, I feel like, until you find something.
Mm-hmm.
Are you currently in Boston?
No, so my last semester is in LA.
Oh, okay.
So I'm doing you do an internship, so I'm working 3 days a week, and then I take classes 2 days a week.
Oh, okay. How's the internship going?
It's interesting. I've never really done like the 9 to 5 internship before. But it's allowed me to see like that side of like because I study filmmaking technically, so I'm working at a production company as a design intern. And it's been interesting to see like the I don't know capitalist side of the arts, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I'm just another intern.
So is that more on your design work or your filmmaking work?
Yeah, that's more on my design work. I mean, you really need for what I do is you need like a photographer's eye because it's pulling a lot of references from like movies and photographers. So you need to like know a lot about that. But at the end of the day, I do a lot of like design stuff as well.
Yeah, I saw that you did a lot of like coffee designs, and I was just wondering, like, is that kind of like, was that more like the production's decision to go with coffee, or is that more like you just love coffee?
No, that was most of the stuff that's on my website is actually projects that I did for class.
Oh, really?
You had to design a cookbook, and I love coffee so much, and I was like, oh, good opportunity to learn more about coffee. Let's make a book about coffee.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What's your favorite cup of coffee?
I love a flat white. It's not very known, and they don't often make it properly, but when you get a good one, it's fantastic.
Or going back to your photography work, I saw that you're working with a magazine called Index Mag.
Yes, so that's well, I'm not working with them anymore because they're in Boston.
Oh, okay.
I was their photo director. I worked with them as photo director for a year, and I've shot for them for like the last 2 years. But they're from my college, so they're funded by Emerson.
Okay.
So we just work like through the semester, and we print the magazine every semester.
For the Case by the Creek series was like I saw one of your subjects. They had on like a lot of makeup and kind of like design work done, and I was just wondering if you knew like kind of the story behind that, or if it was more just like more for like an editorial cover kind of style, or if you had a vision for it.
So for that shoot, the idea actually came from our editor-in-chief, and it was a concept to like mimic these like old school movies like The Monster and the Creek. We wanted to rewrite the narrative to be like more inclusive.
Yeah.
So we got Severity Stone. They do drag in Boston, and they did all of their makeup. Our team did the styling, and it was a collaboration because they obviously like go hand in hand. Like the makeup has to go with the styling.
Yeah.
Where I had more fun was with the lighting, especially like the contact lenses that were like super green. I had a lot of fun like picking the colors that would like make those pop. But yeah, I mean, we have stylists, we have like a creative team, makeup, and it was like all a collaboration.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. And I feel like that maybe helped you when transitioning into this internship of like getting used to the production side of everything. Where you're like, oh yeah, I'm used to kind of working with a lot of people on a certain project, maybe.
Yeah, and you realize because like at the end of the day, you do see like one frame, one photo, one movie, but nobody really realizes how many people go behind. You might just see a person and they're posing, but like someone had to think about like the exact shade of like their suit, their shirt, the makeup, the hair, the lighting, the location, and all these decisions are made by different people, and it's a collaboration. And sometimes it's tricky to work with certain people, and that's where, I mean, I think as you go and as you like work more in this world, you learn to work with all types of people, and sometimes you do have more say, and sometimes you don't, and it's what it is.
Yeah.
You just need to adapt.
Yeah, is it more kind of like a art director oversees everything and then you'll put in your input as the specialist, but it's kind of comes down to their decision ultimately?
Or like you're editing, like when I shoot my photos, I always know what they're gonna look like at the end after like processing. And
Yeah.
sometimes an art director comes in and they want like something super saturated and contrasting. I'm like, but at the end of the day, it's like if they're the client and they're paying for it, it's what you gotta do.
Yeah. I totally get that.
That's why it's important to have like both the work that you do to get paid and then your personal work, because that's really where you have all agency, and that's really where you can do what you want to be doing. Like you pay the bills one side, and then in the other, I mean, at the end of the day, we're artists and we do this for a reason, and we have stuff to say.
Yeah. I totally get that from just like the artist perspective, but I really get that through your captions on your photos on Instagram because you kind of have like a poetical verse to a lot of things. And there was one photo in particularly, it's an older photo, but of a guy laying on the stairs, and you were saying how like, oh, I thought he was, or he was smiling, so I thought he was okay. I thought that struck really hard. I was so good. Um,
What photo you're talking about?
um,
Was it a portrait?
Yeah. Yes, it was a portrait, but it wasn't like a close-up portrait. It was kind of more like a eagle point of view or God's eye point of view and aerial perspective going down on the staircase of him kind of laying slanted on the stairs.
Oh, okay. I did a lot of that. That was a lot of my early works, a lot of staircases and people just
Uh,
like floor.
right. Yeah, just trying everything out and seeing kind of what works. A lot of your work now is more like close-up, like straightforward black and white work. Is that kind of what you prefer over color, or do you kind of blend the two?
I mean, I think it depends. I'm still very young. I just turned 23, and I think I still haven't found like my thing yet. I think that's why also my work is so diverse. Like I shoot sports, fashion, street, portraiture, landscape, because I've just been like trying a little bit of everything and seeing where I am more.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like color for certain things, but specifically for my portraits, which a lot of my work has been that because my thesis that I just finished was a lot of that. They are in black and white because I think they feel a little bit more timeless.
Yeah.
Um, but I like both black and white and color. It depends on the project.
Is that kind of why you went black and white for Catherine's portraits? And how was that experience?
Yeah, well, that was crazy. I was doing a project for a documentary class. I was trying to like document women who are empowered through running because I'm a runner
Yeah.
myself.
Mhm.
And I heard her story and I reached out I just went on her website and I emailed her. And like a week later, her agent got back to me and she was like, I'm not sure if like Catherine will take this, but I'll forward the email to her and just maybe she'll get back to you. And she got back to me and I thought she lived in Boston. Apparently she didn't, but she was going to be in Boston that weekend. So she was just like, come to my hotel and like we can talk. So I took my camera. I explained the project. I did a little interview and then I took those photos. And she was actually the first subject that I did for that project, which is kind of crazy because she's like such a big icon in women's rights and women's running.
Yeah.
But yeah, the same. Before I shot, I knew that I was going to go for the black and white just because I wanted to feel like if someone opened up these photos in a couple of years, it could relate to them the same way. Because color is like a big thing with giving away when the photo was taken.
Yeah. It really kind of, I think, especially on location, depending on like what the background looks like and stuff like that, you can kind of tell when something looks more vintage than something a little more modern. Um, And for those who don't know, it's Catherine Switzer, who was the first woman to run the Boston Marathon in 1967. So that's who we're referring to.
Check
um,
her out. She has a very inspiring story.
yeah, no, that's awesome that she was also having the opportunity for you to photograph her, but also you having the opportunity to meet her and just learn more about her. I think it's just really cool interaction.
And she opened a lot of doors for me. I mean, that's why I started shooting the marathon because she really liked the project. So I started following some of her runners, and then eventually she offered me a press pass for the marathon that year. Well, or a grandstand pass, and I got to take all these photos of the elite runners, and I ended up selling one to Brooks Running, and it was
Oh,
literally a matter
dang.
of, like emailing a bunch of people, all these newspapers, like what can I do? I knew I had this photo, and I was like, what
Yeah.
can I do with this? Because it was like the toughest Boston in I don't know how many years. It was the first American to win in like 40 years. Um,
Wow.
so it was just a matter of like finding who. I knew this photo was gonna be worth something for someone. It was just like a lot of sending emails and like negotiating and stuff. But that was pretty fun.
Yeah, wow. I
And
bet that was
sports photography, which is
right. Yeah. And then going between all of these experiences between going to Boston, going to LA, coming from Mexico City, is there one city you feel a little bit more tied to? I mean, I'm assuming it would be Mexico just because that's where you grew up, but in terms of traveling between these three cities, is or by being in one of them, have you always had like a thought of like, oh, if I ever go, or like once I go back there, I have a new series I want to do or something like that?
I mean, definitely the one that feels more like home is Mexico. LA, I don't know at all. I've been here for 2 weeks and I feel as lost as, I mean, I'm just lost here. But
That's
Boston,
normal.
it's so big. It's insane. I mean, it's a lot like Mexico City, but I don't know LA like I do Mexico City.
Yeah.
Boston, I love, and it did feel like home at a certain point, but there's nothing like where you grew up from, and Mexico is where I want to go back to at the end of the day. Projects that I know that I want to do, that's such a. I've actually been struggling a lot with that lately because coming here to LA, I just finished my BFA, which was a photo book. I just finished like all these projects and all these shoots, and I'm here, clean slate, and I'm like, well, what do I do now? Um, but I think I've realized that a lot of the projects that I've done in the past, I just start doing them, and then looking back, I can start tracing a project. But rarely do I like sit down, write an idea, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go outside and take photos of these things, and then that's gonna be my project. It rarely works that way. It's more of like intuitive. Like when I travel, I take my camera around, um, and then eventually I can like sort of like a puzzle. You start putting the pieces together, and it creates and turns into something.
Yeah. It's more of like yeah, I totally get that intuition of like sometimes it works planned, but a lot of the times it really is just like spontaneity that kind of causes the best ideas, I feel like.
Mhm.
That BFA series, was that the Pilgrim series that you did?
Yeah, so it's a book, um, and it was a contrast between like very minimalist landscapes and very intimate portraits because I think that's sort of how I relate to the world. Like I'm actually a very shy person, so I'm either like incredibly distanced and reserved or like very intimate.
Hmm.
And these landscapes I've been shooting. I started shooting them unknowingly when I traveled to Peru about 3 years ago. And then I was looking through my work and I started seeing like all these landscapes in like different parts of the world that ended up feeling very similar. And a lot of people actually they often ask me like, where is this photo? Where is this photo? Because they aren't really subjective of a place specifically.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure how to describe them. I don't know if you see. I think I've posted a few of them.
Yeah.
Um, I haven't posted that much from that body of work. And then the portraits are people that are like important in my life, friends, family.
So all the newer ones, are they uh, the friends and family that you've had over the years, or are they people you've just met in LA, like the very more recent photos that you've made of black and white?
Yeah, no, all of those photos that I've been uploading are, I mean, I took over the course of the last 2 to 3 years.
Mm.
And it's funny,
Okay.
that project began, that was one case in which I sat down and I wrote an idea and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then it ended up being something completely different. It was supposed to be a project exploring aging, because my grandmother has been not so healthy for a couple of years, and I was like, started to think about like what aging is, what death is, and I was like, okay, I want to document how aging affects people differently, which is like such a big and broad thing to do.
Yeah.
I worked on that for like a year, and it was like none of the work made sense. There was like no visual language, no cohesiveness. It was just like random scattered photos.
Hmm.
And then a teacher of mine recommended that I do like contact prints of all the work that I had, and I just laid it out on a table and like started seeing that I had these portraits that were all like square, like this very straight look, but it almost feels like you're seeing through the person. And I had these like I had a lot of those two things. And I was like, well, maybe this is where this project's actually at.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that straight on approach really does put you into the like subject's perspective of really trying to figure out who they are and stuff like that. And how you said you like to blend, or how you were using like landscapes and portraits to kind of blend that intimacy with the scenery. I noticed there was a few photos. They might actually be from the series, but it's like people in a faraway distance in a bigger landscape that kind of encapsulates them. Um, was that kind of dealt with the same perspective, or was that kind of more for something else that you had in mind?
No,
If you,
definitely all those photos are maybe didn't make the final cut of the book, but all those photos were taken in like the same with the same sensibility. It's almost like it's this huge landscape and these very tiny people, but for some reason, what draws you in the frame is this tiny person, and
yeah,
it can get lost so easily because like these landscapes are so grand and so big, and these people seem so meaningless, but for some reason, your eye goes directly to them, and
yeah,
it's like they're lonely and they're isolated, but you like connect with that for some reason.
yeah. I mean, maybe it's that. Yeah, I think in your one of your more recent posts of the black and white landscape, where you had a caption describing the connectivity between people, and I think maybe that's a possible reason as to why it's interpreted that way, where like we could see ourselves in relation to that one person as seeing ourselves as isolated, but also kind of just imagining us in that situation if the person's not actually identified. But
Exactly, like you can't really
yeah,
tell who that is. That could be anyone. That could be me or you or whatever.
yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of those people, I actually don't know who they are.
It was just on the. It
No
was
one
just
will ever know.
yeah. I totally get that. For your self portraits, I know you just started kind of experimenting with that. One of the self portraits that you posted, actually, I wasn't sure if it was one that you took, because I know you posted some from another photographer, but there was one of you within like a crowd. I didn't know if you like set that up on a tripod or if you had someone photographing you.
Oh, no, this is not a self-portrait. Um,
Yeah.
Someone took that. Yeah. Um, no, really my self-portraits were the very first ones were
Yeah.
these. I was so terrified before it pointing the camera at me. Um, it's almost ironic that like that's what you do, but then when it's done to you, it completely changes the narrative.
Yeah, I feel like uh it's a common thread with a lot of photographers if it's not their main subject area. I I kind of find that a lot of people who don't practice self-portraiture a lot is kind of more the reason why they don't like self-portraiture is like no. Yeah, it
That's
is it
exactly
does.
why they should do it. Like if you don't like it, then do it and figure out what about it is it that's like bothering you. And you can only find that out by doing it.
Yeah, I think maybe the answer might be in the photos too.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
um I know you said that it's kind of more relative to student work, but Is your photographs also student work as well as your design work, or is that more updated in your perspective?
I mean, honestly, my last update of my website, I did more as a portfolio to apply to jobs.
Yeah.
So it really is a mix of everything. There isn't that much design work. I don't consider myself a graphic designer by any means, but I enjoy doing it a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a skill that whatever you do nowadays will be helpful because technology is so present and important everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of the work on there is stuff that I've created over the last 3 years in college because I didn't consider myself a photographer before going to college. I didn't really take photos. I went to school, I thought, for directing, and now it's probably the last thing I'll do. I'm more into photography and cinematography now.
So having that directorial experience, did you encounter a lot of like cinematographers while you were studying that, and then that kind of brought you into it?
Yeah, it was like I was doing a project and I wanted to be doing what the other guy was doing. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't feel like that's where my skills were like being used properly. And I'm surprised that I didn't realize this before, but I think I just didn't know enough about filmmaking to like label like what this person did, what this person did. But I started taking photographs first, and then I went into cinematography,
Oh,
which
okay.
was great because photography is really good at giving you like the basics.
Yeah.
And once you have the mechanics down, once you know the technicalities, which anyone can learn,
Mhm.
that's when you start to have fun.
Uh, is your photographs for Vacant Mag also from Boston?
Yes, I took them in Boston. Yuhan is a friend of mine from college, and he actually just started modeling. And I think he got signed because someone saw those photos,
Oh,
I'm
really?
sure, which is
Awesome.
great. But Vacant Magazine, I think they're an independent magazine that's published in Mexico City.
Oh,
And
cool.
for some reason, I guess they just saw my work and someone contacted me. And it was actually very fun because usually when these magazines reach out to you, they often have a concept or an idea. And they were literally like, just do whatever you want and send it to us.
Oh,
And at that time, I was actually very busy with school and the magazine and everything. And one day I was just like walking around the beach with my friend who happens to be like very fashionable. And I took these photos of him and they ended up loving them.
they look great.
Like it was that case where I did not plan anything, which is rare in fashion.
Yeah.
I didn't plan anything, and it just happened. Yeah.
Are you getting more of a fashion sense from taking those photos and now that you're in the industry trying to, or just working with other productions, are you kind of getting a sense for how you're bringing about other shoots and stuff like that?
Yeah, I
Um,
think the more I experience, like every single set, I learn something that I can take to the next one, and they can be super meaningful things or like big things. Um, and I never thought I would do fashion work. I never considered myself a fashion. That's like the last thing I thought I would end up doing. But I do think there is a lot of like art in it, more so than like commercial work. I think fashion is one of the few places where you can get paid while creating art.
yes.
I think it's harder to do that with commercial and sports photography. So maybe it comes from there. I never considered myself like fashion person, like or it
Mhm.
wasn't very significant in my life. But after doing all this and seeing how meaningful it can be to people, or like what it says about you, how you can express your personality through it, it's become much more important in my life.
Are you kind of more just directing the photography aspect of things, or do you think you also have to bring a lot of fashion sense to the area as well to be like a successful fashion photographer?
I mean, a lot of the time, I mean, always when you do a fashion shoot, you're going to have a stylist on set, you're going to have an art director, a creative director. But the thing with like the photography, the style of photography that you use has to complement the fashion. So you really need to understand that. Like
Yeah.
if the lighting, the model, if the composition doesn't work with the clothes themselves, the photo won't work. So it's really a collaboration. But I think the more you learn, the more you can apply like knowledge from other parts.
Oh, definitely. Is there any inspirational photographers or artists that you look up to?
Oh wow. Oof, there's a lot. Photographers, I mean, of course, Leibovitz, she's probably like the first fashion photographer that I saw, and I was like, oh, wait, women can actually make it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
she's
Petra
huge.
Collins, she's all over the place right now. Carlota Guerrero, she's really good. Vivian Meyer, I love her street work.
Hmm.
There's this Mexican photographer called Tania Franco Klein that I've been looking at her work a lot. I often see that not always my work is inspired by fashion photographers necessarily.
Yeah,
Like Vivian Meyer's street work, I think that's probably been one of my greatest influences, just because it's so crazy seeing like a street photographer. Some of her photos could be fashion editorials, but seeing that and realizing that it's street, it's like, wow, that's
right.
thing.
I
Yeah,
think it's just like streets of New York also kind of just like
everyone
gives
else
you
is
that opportunity.
definitely. Yeah.
um, Maybe next time we'll see a self-portrait of you, it'll be with a twin reflex camera looking in a store window.
Yeah. Yeah. That, that's fun. I was gonna mention that earlier. I hate it when people ask about cameras. I really don't think that they matter.
Mm,
But when I discovered um I had a Mamiya C330, a twin reflex, and that's what I shot all those portraits with. I did see something change because when I was taking my portraits for my BFA, because when I started taking those portraits, I think I was probably shooting on a maybe 35 millimeter or on a digital camera, where like the camera is up in your eye and between you and the subject.
mhm.
But with a waist level viewfinder, you're looking down and at the subject, and there's almost like that barrier is taken
Yeah.
down. So I think those photos would have been very different with a different camera.
Yeah. Are you even at waist level? Were you shooting more waist level area, or were you aiming upwards? Because I know some people kind of do both for portraits.
Yeah. No, I was mostly like standing on chairs.
Yeah, I get
Because
that.
I didn't want to have that like lower upper perspective. I didn't want that to play. I really wanted to be the photos very straightforward. So I was standing wherever I could.
Were you noticing a big difference going from 35 to medium format in terms of like detail and resolution? Because I know that's a
Well, yeah,
reason a lot of people are moving to it.
a different world. I think there's two components to it. One, with 35, you usually get 36 frames. With medium
Yeah.
format, if you're shooting 6x6 or 6x7, you'd get either 12 or 10 frames. And it's much more expensive, the film itself and the developing. So you really become hyper conscious of like what you're shooting. When I started, I just shot digital, and I'd go into a fashion shoot and I'd shoot 800 photos. Now I
Yeah.
shoot maybe 4 or 5 rolls of film, and every single photo is like I take my time. I really slow down to like compose a photo frame, lighting. Like I'm extra careful with everything. And then the resolution, it's insane. I used to use a lot my Sony mirrorless. It's like 42 megapixels,
Hmm.
insane quality that you don't even need. But seeing scans of medium format, I can't even compare that. They're so much better. Like it's insane.
Do you think in the future you would switch to large format, or do you think that's just too much of a hassle at
Oh,
this point?
definitely. I
Mhm.
as soon as I am settled in a city and I will not be moving
Yeah,
relatively often, I want to move to large format because that I can't imagine how that slows you down.
right.
I
Sally,
I would have been trained with like film actually and then moved into digital if I would still. I mean, I still do digital because some people just don't want to pay for the film.
yeah.
But I think I don't know. It just film is I love film much more than digital.
Have you developed your own film, or do you usually just send it to a lab?
No, well, black and white I used to develop at the lab in our school.
Yeah.
And we didn't have color developing because it's very bad for you apparently. But I'm certain that when I'm settled in a place, I'll be developing all my film and not paying
Right.
anyone.
Uh, you might be interested in this then. I saw a video of someone who actually churned a shipping container into a camera, and he was taking photos of people at a park.
Oh, I think I've seen this. Yeah, like the whole thing is a camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. This guy that turns a bunch of random stuff into cameras. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was so crazy. And then he had a dark room in the back of it. Oh,
Yeah.
that was
I
genius.
really love that there's still people out there that like value that. Like, there's still a lot of people that are so focused in the process itself.
Yeah.
And there's so many things you can do with photography, like in a chemical level. There's so much you can learn there. I wouldn't even consider myself like good at that because I just know the very basics, and it's definitely something that I want to keep exploring. Like alternative processes are something that definitely interests me a lot, and it gives me hope that like film is going to. I mean, it's coming back a lot now, and
Yeah.
that's really cool.
I guess like I think it was Kodak or someone actually just posted that they're gonna start making more film that's different than what they used to produce, and so like people are all about that right now.
Yeah. I mean, they just all their prices just went up by like 20% or something, and I
Oh
think
God.
it's for. I know it's getting expensive. So make sure you find clients that pay for the film and the developing and everything.
Yeah. Or like how you said you wanted to do analog. You wish you did analog first before moving into digital. Is that just because of like the reason of just learning to slow down, learning the processes, so when you moved into digital, you had the same mindset, but just and didn't like go over and shoot 800 photos or stuff like that?
Well, I think that when you shoot digital, you can get away with not knowing a lot of things very well, like not understanding exposure very well. You can blow up your ISO. If you're shooting raw, any dark area that you have no information in, you can definitely get most of that back. Like you can get away with not being a good technical photographer. And I think you first have to be very good at like the technical and the mechanic, and then you can move on to like exploring other things or like but first you just need to sit down and like study that, and
Yeah.
it's easy not to do that when you're shooting digital.
Yeah. Like like the common saying of expose for your highlights, because
Yeah,
you could always bring back the darks.
exactly.
Um,
Like when
but
I started shooting with my phone,
yeah.
which gives you no control for anything.
Yeah.
But that was actually very interesting because it was very intuitive. It was just like, oh, this is what I'm taking up, and that's when I was taking all those photos of those staircases because for some reason they caught my eye often.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because like a lot of people get that question of like, oh, what do you shoot on if it looks even remotely creatively
Yeah.
artistic?
Yeah.
You're like,
I
oh,
mean,
it's an iPhone.
anything look, you can make digital look like film,
Yeah.
supposedly, but I think it's not about the look, it's about the process
Yeah.
that's gonna get you that look. It's not about like mimicking the grain and the colors. No, it's slowing down your process is going to allow you to take photos like that. I mean, of course, if you're shooting sports, a race, a marathon, a game, don't do film. That's where you can really benefit from the technology. But
Yeah.
for portraiture, for landscape, for street, I mean, not for, well, depends also on street. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's knowing what your tools can do and picking them for the right scenario.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Like, yeah, I couldn't imagine someone shooting sports
Like a
trying to just
5 millimeter, like a large format camera, like that's
yeah.
just not gonna work.
It's all about the telephoto, zoom in, super fast shutter speed now.
There was something that I was thinking about right before you called me because someone commented on a photo. It's those people that comment those things just to like get follows, I think. But it said something, and I wanted to mention this just because I was thinking about it. But it said like, "Oh, you have such a good eye," and whenever I hear that, it bothers me so much because, I mean, yes, you can have a good eye, but I mean, there's two parts to it. I mean, you can have a good eye in that you're good in the technique, but I think you develop your eye more when you like invest in other things that will enrich your photography,
Mhm.
traveling, reading,
Yeah,
anything that will like train your eye in a different, watching movies even.
right.
Like there's all this other work that you can do that's not directly affecting your photography or whatever art you're doing, but will indirectly affect what you're doing or the stories that you're saying or how you say those stories.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Like just seeing the cinematography of, I feel like I mean, sure, like American films do have like great cinematography in movies, but I see a lot more decisive cinematography in foreign films. And like even I don't know if you ever watched the movie Roma,
Of
but
course.
yeah, the cinematography in that, or like the ending sequence of the shot of the staircase going up and then just ending, like that was perfect.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think you're totally right about when someone says you have a great eye. It's just one of those like, well, this is what I'm going to keep training for the rest of my life until I see something that I'm like, all right, like I'm getting better. But it's like I feel like we'll never
Like
catch up with
part
her.
of that is how you connect to a subject when you're shooting them, and that's not necessarily connected with how you frame or how you see things.
Yeah.
Like a lot more components to photography than just like looking through a viewfinder, composing, framing, getting your exposure right, and shooting. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people lose the aspect of that connection that you create with your subject, even if it isn't even a person. Like, just like if it is a landscape, like enjoy the landscape, like take it in and then try and take a photo that mimics the experience or evokes that emotion that you felt in
And
that.
having, yeah. And going back to those photos, I think I was probably feeling very lonely when I was doing that work, and that's why those photos are that way.
Yeah. That would totally make sense. Yeah, I'm excited to see where you go from here. I mean, I know you did like even during the staircase series, like there was like some architecture photos that I thought was really interesting that it seems you may have diverted away from and focused more on portraits, but I thought those architecture shots were really good.
I mean, I'll just keep shooting whatever calls me. Like I think, yeah, like I said, I'm just young and I still have a lot to explore, so I'm just gonna keep doing whatever I intuitively want to be doing at that time.
Yeah. No, that's how it should work because then
And one
that's
day it'll make sense, and I'll
yeah,
find myself having my studio somewhere and doing the work that I want to be doing, hopefully.
right. Same.
Yeah, that's what we want.
um, but yeah, that that's it on my end. If is
Okay.
there anything else that bothered you from Instagram comments?
No, just that was in my head right now because I literally saw it as I was calling you.
No, I that's a good call out though,
Yeah.
because that's a common comment from people who aren't photographers who are trying to just give you a compliment. But yeah, I
There's a lot
totally
of layers to it.
yeah. But yeah, you could check out Renata on Renata Brockmann on Instagram, renatabrockman.com.
Yes.
um, and hopefully we'll see her in Mexico City when
Something
right.
soon.
Um,
Yeah, we'll see.
okay.
We'll
Well,
see. Well, thank you very much for
yeah.
having
Thanks for talking to
me
me.
with all of this.
It was fun talking to you.
You too.
Okay. Bye. Having a good night.
Bye.